I paid for her entire education. 4 years, every textbook, every semester, every month of rent while she studied. She graduated on a Saturday. 8 days later, she left me for a doctor. And I wish I could tell you that was the worst part. It wasn't. The worst part came 2 years later when I walked into a hospital for a work assignment and saw her standing in the hallway. Because the woman who traded me for a better life hadn't gotten one. My name is Daniel. I'm 28 years old. And for a long time, I believed love meant sacrifice. I believed that if you gave everything to the person you loved, one day that love would come back to you. Maybe not in money, maybe not in equal effort, but in loyalty, in gratitude, in the kind of future two people build together when nobody believes in them. I was wrong, and I learned it in the most expensive way possible. I met Valeria during our second year at university. I was studying engineering. She was studying nursing. We met in a study group neither of us really needed. One of those groups where 3 people do all the work and everyone else just shows up with coffee and panic. She sat across from me with her hair pulled back, a highlighter in one hand, completely focused. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying to be noticed. But somehow I noticed everything. The way she leaned forward when someone explained something, the way she smiled when she solved a difficult problem, the way she made people feel intelligent even when she was clearly the smartest person at the table. After the study session, we walked to the bus stop together. That walk turned into dinner. Dinner turned into daily messages. Daily messages turned into waiting for each other after class as if it had always been normal. We fell in love fast, maybe too fast. But when you're 22 and someone looks at you like the safest place in the world, you don't question the speed. You just hold on. For the first year, Valeria was everything I thought love was supposed to feel like. Warm, attentive, ambitious. She talked about becoming a nurse as if it weren't merely a career but a calling. She wanted to help people. She wanted to become someone her younger cousins could admire. She wanted to prove that where you begin doesn't have to determine where you end. And I loved that about her. Maybe too much. Because when someone's dream sounds noble, it becomes easier to ignore the ways that dream begins consuming you. I wasn't wealthy, not even close. I worked part-time at a coffee shop on campus to cover my own expenses. My apartment was tiny, my furniture was mostly second-hand, and my meals were whatever could be stretched across 3 days without making me hate my life. But I was managing. Barely. Valeria wasn't. Her family couldn't support her financially. There were debts, family problems, and complications that aren't really mine to tell. But the result was simple. She was one unpaid semester away from dropping out. I still remember the night she told me. We were in my apartment. Rain was hitting the window, and the whole room felt heavier than usual. She sat on the edge of my bed with her face in her hands and said, "If I leave now, I'm never coming back." I asked what she meant. She said, "If I can't pay for this semester, I'll have to go home. And if I go home, that's it. I'll end up taking whatever job I can find. Helping my family and nursing will become something I almost did." She tried to laugh. Then she started crying. Not polite crying, real crying. The kind that comes when someone is grieving a life they can still see, but can no longer reach. And I made a decision that night. I said, "Let me help." She shook her head immediately. "No, Daniel, no. I can't let you do that." I said, "You're not letting me. I'm offering." She said, "It's too much." And then I said the words that changed the next 4 years of my life. "I can carry this until you graduate." I want to be honest about something. In that moment, I felt proud. I felt strong. I felt like a man. Not because money makes someone a man, but because I thought I was doing what love was supposed to do. I thought love stepped in when life became cruel. I thought love said, "Lean on me until you can stand again." I imagined our entire future in that moment. I imagined her graduating, us getting married, us telling our children one day about the years when we struggled and how we survived because we chose each other. That fantasy cost me almost everything. To pay for her education, I accepted every job I could find. I kept the coffee shop job during the week. I picked up dawn shifts loading boxes at a warehouse. I made delivery runs on weekends, sometimes on a bicycle, across the city in rain, heat, and freezing wind. I tutored first-year engineering students whenever I had enough energy to pretend I wasn't exhausted. There were months when I slept 4 hours a night and called it normal. I paid for her textbooks, her rent, her transportation, part of her food, uniforms, supplies, exam registrations, fees that appeared out of nowhere. Every time another expense came up, she would look at me with those worried eyes and say, "I hate asking." And I would answer, "You're not asking. We're building something." That was the word I always used. We. We were building. But looking back, I don't know whether Valeria ever heard we. Maybe what she heard was, "Daniel will handle it." And I did. I handled everything. She promised me constantly that it wouldn't always be like this. "When I graduate," she would say, "I'm going to make every sacrifice worth it." Sometimes she would hold my face in her hands and say, "You don't understand what you're doing for me." And I believed her, because I needed to believe her, because the alternative was too painful. The alternative was admitting that maybe I wasn't building a future, maybe I was funding an exit. The final year was when things started changing. Not all at once. That's the dangerous part. People don't always transform overnight. Sometimes they drift away slowly enough that by the time you notice, you're already explaining it for them. Valeria became more confident, more polished. She dressed differently, carried herself differently, spoke differently. At first, I was proud. I thought, look at her, she's becoming who she was meant to be. Then the changes became colder. Study sessions started ending later and later. Her phone was always angled away from me. She bought clothes I knew she couldn't afford with the money I was giving her. When I asked, there was always an explanation. A classmate had sold them cheaply. There had been a discount. Someone had given her a gift. And because I loved her, I accepted explanations that never quite felt right. Then there was the laugh, that private laugh, the one I used to hear when I sent her something stupid, the laugh that made me feel as though I had access to a part of her nobody else did. I started hearing it while she looked at her phone, not at me, at the screen. Every time I noticed, I told myself not to be insecure. She was stressed. She was almost finished. She had new friends. She was networking. She was growing. I called it growth because calling it distance would have forced me to act, and I didn't want to act. I wanted the fantasy to survive. Then graduation arrived. I sat in the front row. I wore the only good shirt I owned. I took pictures of her crossing the stage. When they announced her name, I stood and clapped so hard my palms hurt. I cried, actually cried. I watched her receive a diploma that had cost me 4 years of sleep, health, money, and youth. And I don't regret crying, because in that moment, I was proud. Proud of her, proud of us, or what I thought was us. She found me in the crowd. She smiled. And that was the final time she ever smiled at me as though I belonged in her future. 8 days later, she asked me to meet her at a park. A park, neutral ground, public enough to prevent a scene, private enough to destroy someone quietly. I knew before she said a word. You don't ask someone to meet you in a park when you have good news. She was sitting on a bench when I arrived. Perfect hair, new blouse, phone in her hand. She looked nervous but not devastated. That told me more than anything else. She said, "Daniel, we need to talk." I said, "So talk." She took a breath. "I've changed." I stared at her. She continued, "I want different things now than I did when we started. I don't think we're in the same place anymore." There are phrases people use when they want to sound gentle while doing something cruel. That was one of them. So I asked the only question that mattered. "Is there someone else?" She looked down. For the first time in 4 years, she couldn't lie to my face quickly. That pause told me everything. Finally, she said yes. I asked, "Who?" She answered, "A doctor from the hospital where I'm starting." A doctor. older, established, a car, a house, a life that already looked complete. Everything I didn't have. Everything I couldn't have because I had spent 4 years working myself into the ground so that she could stand there, inside the life I had financed, and tell me she had found someone better. I waited for her to say more, maybe to apologize properly, maybe to admit how ugly it was, maybe to say she understood what she had done. Instead, she said, "He understands the world I'm entering." I almost laughed. The world she was entering, as if I hadn't paid the admission fee. But I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I didn't remind her of the nights I had stayed awake counting money while she slept. I didn't list the textbooks, rent, uniforms, food, or tuition payments. Because when someone needs to be reminded of what you sacrificed for them, they already know. They simply don't care enough for it to matter. So I stood. I said, "Okay." She looked surprised. Maybe she expected me to fight. Maybe she expected tears. Maybe she wanted proof that I was still available to be wounded. I gave her nothing. I walked away. The first year afterward almost broke me. Not because I missed her. That part faded faster than I expected. What destroyed me was realizing I had no idea who I was without the mission of supporting her. For 4 years, every hour of my life had been organized around Valeria's future. Her rent, her schedule, her stress, her exams, her dream. And suddenly, her dream belonged to someone else. I had neglected my own studies, my health, my friendships, my sleep. I had become a support structure instead of a person, and when she walked away, I collapsed like scaffolding after the building was finished. But slowly, I began rebuilding. I returned to my engineering program with a different kind of focus. Not desperate, clean. I finished my degree. I got a job with a company that developed software for medical systems, hospital infrastructure, digital records, patient workflows. The kind of work nobody notices when it functions correctly, but everyone panics about when it fails. And for the first time in years, I was building something for myself. I slept through the night. I ate proper meals. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I stopped imagining conversations that would never happen. I stopped waiting for closure from someone who had already taken enough. 18 months later, I met Sophia. She was a lawyer, sharp, direct, independent in a way that didn't feel cold, only complete. On our third date, I tried to pay for everything. She looked at me as though I had done something suspicious. She said, "I like dinner. I don't like debt." I laughed. She didn't. She meant it. That was Sophia. She didn't want to be rescued. She didn't want to be carried. And she didn't want a man who disappeared into her needs and called it love. Being with her felt strange at first, not because it was difficult, because it was balanced. I wasn't accustomed to balance. I was accustomed to being useful. Sophia taught me that being loved is not the same as being needed, and for the first time I began to understand the difference. I believed the Valeria chapter was finally closed. Then came San Miguel Hospital. My company won a contract to implement a new digital records system there. I was assigned to the rollout team. Just another hospital, just another project. At least that was what I thought. We arrived on a Monday morning. Bright lights, busy corridors, nurses moving quickly, doctors walking as if the building belonged to them. I was setting up equipment on the third floor when I looked up and saw her. Valeria. But not the Valeria from graduation. Not polished, not glowing, not victorious. She was wearing scrubs and holding a chart near the nurse's station, and she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with one difficult shift.
Her face had changed. Her shoulders had changed. That confident spark she carried when she left me? Gone. What remained was careful, smaller, like someone who had learned to take up less space. She saw me and stopped, completely. "Daniel?" I nodded. "Valeria." She looked at my identification badge. "What are you doing here?" "My company is installing the hospital's new record system. I'm part of the implementation team. She swallowed. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then someone called her name and she walked away. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few days, I learned the rest of her story without looking for it. People talk in hospitals, quietly, in break rooms, at nurses' stations, near elevators, and Valeria's name had a shadow attached to it. The doctor she left me for was married, not separated, not almost divorced, married with children. She had not become his partner, she had become his secret. For 2 years, she was the woman he saw between shifts, the woman he messaged late at night, the woman he made promises to before returning home to his real family. Everyone knew. That was what had truly broken her. Not only the affair, the reputation. Because once the story spread, every achievement she earned became contaminated by suspicion. If she received a good schedule, people whispered. If she was selected for something important, people exchanged looks. If a doctor defended her, someone smirked. She was good at her job, I could see that, but it no longer mattered. Other people had written the story about her, and she was trapped inside it. A few days into the project, she sent me a message. "Can we talk? Just us?" I stared at it for a long time. The old Daniel would have answered immediately. The old Daniel would have felt chosen again. The old Daniel would have mistaken access for affection. But I wasn't him anymore. I waited. Then I replied, 30 minutes, coffee shop across the street. We met after my shift. She was already there when I arrived. No confidence now. No polished smile. Only exhaustion. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm lost, Daniel." I said nothing. She continued, "Nothing turned out the way I thought it would." Then she told me everything. How he said his marriage was complicated. How he claimed he remained only for his children. How he made her feel chosen in private and invisible in public.
Every promise came with a delay. After the divorce, after the holidays, after the children adjusted, after the next promotion, after, after, after. Slowly, she realized she had not left me for a better life. She had left me for a waiting room. Then she said the words I think she had wanted to say since the moment she saw me in that hallway. "Do you think we could try again?" I looked at her, and this is the part people don't expect. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel the rush of revenge I used to imagine. I felt calm, clear, like standing outside after a storm and realizing you don't have to return to the ruined house. I said, "No." She blanked. "Just like that?" "Yes." Her eyes filled. "Why?" I answered, "Because I changed too." She looked down. I continued, "I spent 4 years making myself smaller so you could become bigger. And when you finally became the person you wanted to be, you decided I didn't fit the image." She tried to speak. I raised my hand gently. "Let me finish." She went quiet. "I don't hate you, Valeria. I don't even wish you harm. But I am not available to be the safe place you return to after the exciting choice disappoints you." She cried then, quietly. She said, "I still feel something for you." I said, "Don't confuse nostalgia with love." She looked at me as though the words had hurt. They were supposed to. Not because I wanted to punish her, because they were true. "What you feel right now isn't really about me," I said. "It's about the version of your life where you made a different choice. I understand that, but I am not that choice anymore." Then I told her about Sophia, that I had rebuilt my life, that I was in a relationship where I didn't have to disappear in order to be loved, that Sophia and I were expecting our first child. That was when Valeria broke completely. Not loudly, not dramatically. Her face simply collapsed beneath the realization that the door she thought might still be open
had not only closed, someone else had built a home on the other side. She whispered, "I'm sorry." And for the first time, I believed she meant it. But an apology can be sincere and still arrive too late. I stood. I paid for the coffee and I said, "I hope you rebuild. I truly do, but not with me." Then I left. I never saw Valeria again. I later heard that she left San Miguel Hospital. I don't know where she went. I hope she found peace. I mean that, because I learned something important after her. Bitterness is another kind of debt, and I was finished owing my life to that story. Today, I have a marriage built on reciprocity instead of sacrifice, a partner who sees me as a person, not a provider, a child who will grow up watching two people support each other rather than one person disappearing so the other can rise. And I have something I didn't have for most of my 20s: self-respect. So let me say this clearly.
Sacrifice is not the same thing as love. You can give everything you possess to someone and still not be loved by them. Generosity is beautiful, but generosity offered to someone who sees you as a resource is not romance. It is extraction. And the hardest part is that you often cannot tell the difference until the resource runs out and you discover whether they stay. When I funded Valeria's education, I believed I was being a good partner. Maybe part of me was, but I was also avoiding a difficult truth. A relationship where one person sacrifices everything and the other promises to repay it someday is not a partnership, it is a debt. And debts are easily forgotten by people who never intended to repay them. Your worth is not measured by who chooses you. For years, I measured myself by whether Valeria stayed. When she left, I felt worthless because I had outsourced my entire value to one person's decision. That was my real mistake. Not the money, not the years. The mistake was believing that being chosen by her was what made me valuable. It wasn't. What makes you valuable is not who picks you. It is who you become when you stop waiting to be picked. So tell me honestly, if you paid for someone's entire future and they left the moment they received it, would you ever take them back? Or would you let them live with the choice they made? Drop your verdict in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because here, one story always leads to another.